Today is January 25th, 2024, and we have a very special guest on the show today, Gerald Perreira, who is joining us from Georgetown, Guyana. Gerald A. Perreira is a writer, educator, theologian, and political activist. Mr. Perreira is also the chairperson of the Organization for the Victory of the People, OVP, based in Guyana, as well as an executive member of the Caribbean chapter of the Network for the Defense of Humanity and the Caribbean Pan-African Network, CPAN. Mr. Perreira, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Well, today we wanted to talk to you about the long-running territorial dispute between Guyana and Venezuela over the Essequibo region. Can you please provide us with some of the background and history of the Essequibo region?
Well, Guyana is made up of three counties: Essequibo, Berbice, and Demerara. Georgetown, the capital, is in the county of Demerara. So these are three counties. And this, what is known as what became British Guyana, this, when the British took over, this is all part of the colonial, we are a product of that colonial struggle, the struggle between the imperial countries of Western Europe, the Spanish, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the British. You will know that in the history, the Treaty of Tordesillas, where the Pope at the time divided the world between Spain, the so-called newly discovered lands between Spain and Portugal, and the Spanish navigated into these areas. So they took control of what is known today as places like Gran Colombia, Venezuela, Colombia, and so on. Because all the countries in the mainland of South America speak Spanish, with the exception of Guyana, which is English, Brazil, Portuguese, and then next door you have Suriname that speaks Dutch, and Cayenne, French Guyana. But the majority are Spanish speaking. So is the same thing with Central America, with the exception being Belize, which is English speaking. But this territorial controversy goes years back, as early as 1841. It officially began then. And the argument is that, the Essequibo, the Dutch had moved in there, the Dutch had settled in there, but they had a treaty called the Anglo-Dutch Treaty, and the British end up with Essequibo, and because the British were in Suriname, and then the Dutch got Suriname. But Venezuela, at the time when Venezuela, Bolivar and others were waging a war of liberation against the Spanish, Bolivar warned that as they were fighting this struggle, there was encroachment. Land was being taken from them, with reference to, of course, to the British. When you really look at what happened, first of all, as anti-colonialists, we have to acknowledge that the land was invaded, genocide was committed by the Spanish and the British and the Dutch, and against the indigenous people, and these lands were stolen. So it's a contradiction for us to be anti-colonialists. Today we're talking about anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism, and still defending these borders that were carved out by the imperial powers at that time. They carved it up. But, this is where we are. What the British did was the British brought a man by the name of Schomburg, who was a naturalist and, of course, a British citizen. And he demarcated, was involved in drawing up the boundaries. And Venezuela always claimed that they extended the boundaries, that the British did extend the boundaries, what is known as the Schomburg line, by 30,000 square miles. That's the entire Essequibo area. And the Venezuela never really settled for it. And they had the arbitral award of 1899, where they looked at the issue and tried to come to some settlement. And then we had I think it was in 1966, you had the Geneva Agreement. So they set a framework mechanism for the two countries to resolve this territorial controversy. But the thing is this, brother, and a lot of commentators, with a few exceptions, are not paying attention to this. This territorial controversy has always been used by the imperial powers against any government or regime that is anti-imperialist. This controversy was dormant for a very long time. And what happened was this. In 1953, Cheddi Jagan, whose party is now in office, but of course it has strayed far from the ideology that he first advocated. He became, today his party is into neoliberal economics. They're even talking about, they actually have the Americans here, they want to set up a military base in Guyana. Good, because they have US troops right here from the South Command, training troops from the Guyana Defense Force, and some leading former communists and anti-imperialists are today calling for US military base here. We'll come to that. But the party is no longer the party it was in 1953 when Cheddi Jagan became the first Marxist to be elected to office. This is long before Salvador Allende, 53. So the Venezuelans weren't too comfortable about it, and so was the US, because Washington at the time under Kennedy and so were very wary of this type of, having Marxist regimes in this area, because the Cuban Revolution happened in 59. And when Cheddi Jagan was in office and so on, he was talking about, Cuba and support for Cuba and so, but Venezuela had a president by the name of Romulo Betancourt, and Betancourt was a staunch anti-communist, and he was faced with an armed insurrection in his country by a group organization known as the Armed Forces of National Liberation, and he said that Castro and Cuba had sent military advisors to them. So when Venezuela heard that Guyana was going to get independence in 66, Venezuela decided, well, look, this is not good for us. And they reactivated this dispute, right? Because they had this communist insurrection. You had the Cuban Revolution in 59. And Venezuela did not want to have a Marxist regime on its doorstep. So with the full backing of Washington, they activated it. And what needs to be known is that the United States has always been in Venezuela's corner. Has always been. So for years, when you had client regimes, puppet regimes, pro-imperialist regimes in Venezuela, the US used Venezuela against any progressive government in Guyana. So you had Forbes Burnham, who was a champion of the non-aligned movement, and Burnham he was paving he was on the anti-capitalist part of development. He took solid anti-imperialist positions like recognition of the PLO. We had a PLO office here. We had and he took support for the Sahrawi people's struggle against Morocco, Polisario. We recognized the Sandinistas very early. One of the governments that helped broke the isolation of Cuba. And he even allowed Cuban troops to pass through the military aircraft, going to Angola to refuel here. And the US threatened Guyana. Barbados was doing it earlier, and Barbados bowed under pressure, but Guyana continued. And the US had threatened to bomb their airport in Guyana. And Guyana, he even provided the initial support to help Maurice Bishop when they got rid of Eric Gary. Their weapons and troops came from Guyana to help Maurice Bishop them secure strategic parts of the country. This is an untold story. Who know? There are those who know it, and it was kept a secret for years. But this is it. So the Cuban troops were going through here to Angola to fight, and the Americans pushed Venezuela. Were pushing Venezuela to invade Guyana. They even sold F-16 fighters to Venezuela. And I was here, and I was in the I was in the hierarchy of the People's National Congress Party, and I broke with that party after it abandoned everything Burnham fought for, and it went on the path of neoliberal economics. When the Eastern Bloc collapsed, some of these parties lost their way, and went in the right-wing direction. And Burnham launched the People's Militia to make every citizen a soldier to defend the country. The point I'm making is that the U.S. today, the U.S. is back in Guyana. But you can see, and the reason they're back in Guyana is because you have a right-wing government in Guyana and an anti-imperialist government in Venezuela. When you had an anti-imperialist government in Guyana, they were backing the right-wing in Venezuela. And this is what they've been doing. As Henry Kissinger said, America has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And this is what we're seeing. Now, President Maduro, I don't know, because there's a lot of, you got to be careful with what is circulating, but I can't find or recall where President Maduro mentioned anything about invading Guyana, but that was the narrative that was being peddled. There are sinister external forces are pushing this. This is the United States and Exxon that is in Guyana. We're a captured state a long time. This is a case of classic neocolonialism. And Exxon is pushing it with the United States. Why would President Maduro, whose economy is damaged because of sanctions, why would he want to risk a war to invade Guyana when that would be like giving the imperialists everything on a silver platter? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But they're talking. I heard about this more than 10 years ago. There was this talk about building a military base here. And now it's coming out because I mentioned it and the Morning Star paper in Britain carried it. But the troublemakers, the real troublemakers here are the United States and Exxon, because Exxon is plundering the resources, the oil and gas of Guyana. And they were doing this in Venezuela for a very long time. And it only ended when the Bolivarian Revolution led by Hugo Chavez came in. And Exxon refused to go along with the demands, and they were kicked out. Now they're in Guyana, and they're doing exactly what they did in Venezuela. They're doing it here. This territorial controversy is not going to go away as long as you have in one country a progressive and anti-imperialist regime and a client regime of imperialism in the other. The only time it will go back to sleep, dormant, is when you have two anti-imperialist regimes in both countries cooperating and working together. It will go back. But this territorial dispute has always been used against governments that the US and Britain do not like. In fact, David Cameron was in Guyana recently. This is a man who went to Jamaica as prime minister and told the people of Jamaica that Britain, we have no apology. We're not going to issue an official apology for slavery. And the issue of reparations is out of the question, but we will build a prison in Jamaica. And the reason they want to build a prison is so that they can send back all those Jamaicans who are serving their sentences in Britain. They send them back to Jamaica. And he came to Guyana. And no one protested. And the sad thing is that we have some organizations in Guyana who claim they're Pan-African, but they're not. Their Pan-Africanism is the Pan-Africanism of the types of Mobutu and Jonas Savimbi and Gasha Buthelezi of South Africa. Those are the type of Pan-Africanists that imperialism is happy with, you know? The likes of Leopold Senghor and so, but not the Pan-Africanism of Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Gaddafi, or Kwame Touré, no. So, you know, those are the bourgeois types who are, I refer to them as ethnic entrepreneurs. They have no class analysis. They're not anti-imperialists. And they don't understand, for them, the government in Guyana at present is the government, most of the members are of the Indo-Guyanese, and they enjoy the majority support of Indo-Guyanese, and the main opposition get their support of the African Guyanese. But our fundamental problem here is a class issue. It's a class issue, and race is used. Of course, racism exists, you know, and racism is a powerful dynamic, but class is also a very powerful dynamic. And our fundamental problem in Guyana is an issue of Guyana's wealth is controlled, and the majority of land is in the hands of a few. 14 rich families, 14 wealthy families control tremendous amount of land. So if we're talking about Maduro coming into Guyana, we're already invaded, you know. Exxon has invaded us. The U.S. Southern Command is here. And a lot of our land is already stolen by big business. But this is ignored. It's left out of the analysis. It's pushed to the margins. So these forces, these two main parties, the official opposition and the present government, both of them have united on this territorial controversy against Venezuela. But none of the two of them are seeing the real culprit as the external forces, as Exxon and imperialism. And they cannot take that position because both of them are happy to be managers of what we call this neo-colonial plantation. These two main parties, they are not committed to transformational politics, a politics that will dismantle the plantation arrangement that is still very much intact. It has just been tweaked here and there and modified. But the social relations and the production relations are fundamentally the same. You know, we have this is plantation type this is capitalism, and in its most vicious form today, neoliberal capitalism. And the gap here between the wealth and the wealthy and the poor is just increasing. And the leaders or misleaders of these two main parties, and we have them not just in Guyana, in the Caribbean, with the exception of one and two, like Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Prime Minister Mia Mottley is taking a stand on a number of things, but she's not a revolutionary. And that's okay. We are not going to be a revolutionary, but she is taking progressive positions, and they should be supported. But the two main parties in Guyana, just the political elites compete to show the imperialists who is better at managing this new plantation called Guyana.
Thank you so much for that background. And I think, you know, the left in the U.S., I wouldn't say categorically, but there have been some issues with the left in the U.S. framing this as Guyana versus Venezuela or Venezuela versus Guyana, instead of U.S. and Wall Street imperialism versus Guyana and Venezuela. I guess you gave a very comprehensive answer. I guess a follow-up question would be, what are some of the domestic reasons why Maduro did this in Venezuela? Are there domestic factors that influenced, you know, what are the domestic factors that we should consider when looking at what happened in terms of the Essequibo resolution that Maduro put forward, the referendum?
Well, the line you were getting, the narrative is that was coming out of Guyana and other the right wing media, is that Maduro is doing this to Maduro called the referendum as a way to whip up this form of
Patriotic.
and Venezuela, and some form of nationalism and chauvinism, you want to call it, and so. But
Mm-hmm,
I think what
chauvinism.
really happened is this: the elections in Venezuela are due, coming up very soon, and I think this is my take on it. I think Maduro called this referendum really to take what you call the wind out of the sail of the opposition, because the opposition is backed by the United States. The US is backing their opposition. And everyone know, if you went to Venezuela, you'll know, whether I remember one time years ago engaging people from the left, whether you're communist, fascist, socialist, or what, all Venezuelans were brought up on the diet that Essequibo belongs to Venezuela. So Maduro called their referendum to see tactically what was the position that their opposition was going to take, because the opposition will have to say, they will have to vote in the referendum. They'll have to take the position that Essequibo was part of Venezuela. But they boycotted it. They turned to the supporters and tell them not to go and vote. And there's a reason for that, because Maduro turned and said that they were operating under external influence. And that is the US. The US realized what Maduro was up to, what he was, his line, and they told the opposition, get your people camping not to go out, right? And that is why Maduro said that they have, from the intelligence services, where the opposition was taking directives from the Americans, and they charged them. They charged a number of them. They arrested a number of them. So that put the opposition in a very, it shows how the political, the opportunistic line of the opposition, that although they know and they agree that Venezuela, that's their line, that they would argue that the Essequibo belonged to Venezuela, they at the same time did not encourage, they prevented their supporters from actually going out. And that was at the instigation of the United States. It's clear, it's crystal clear. And that's why Maduro could say that he have information that they were taking directives and prevent the people from turning out to the referendum.
Thank you for that background. And I think, we have to highlight, and you highlighted a lot of this, the fact that the U.S. has been essentially attacking Venezuela and U.S. allies for a very long time, since the Chavez regime. And not only is it sanctions, but they've stolen, with the assistance of the UK and other countries, their gold. As you noted, U.S. Southcom has a presence in Guyana, has been doing military exercises in Essequibo, apparently training for potential war in Taiwan, and claiming that some of the mistakes they made in Ukraine, that they need to do training so they can be prepared for war in Taiwan, and they've been using Essequibo for that. In addition, there's been military warships in disputed waters. So the level of not just military provocations against Venezuela, but sanctions and various other attacks. But this is also an attack on Guyana, as you noted. So people have to look at this as U.S. and Wall Street imperialism versus Venezuela and Guyana, not as a dispute between Venezuela and Guyana. Yeah. And I guess another factor that I wanted to ask you about is whether the U.S. is trying to get a new footholds in South America, in the sense that they sort of lost Colombia with Petro rising to power, and there's a sort of a new leftward tide going through South America, Latin America. So maybe this is yet another attempt for the U.S. to kind of get a stronger foothold in Latin America. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, that is true. Before I get to that, you mentioned earlier that some of the left in the United States see this as a conflict between Guyana and Venezuela. You know, the People's Progressive Party that is in power now, in office, they're in office, power and office, two different. They were part of the Communist International. They attended many meetings of what you call International Communist and Workers' Parties meetings and so. And they dropped out of that many years ago. There's still 1 and 2 persons in that party who are to the left, but they have been marginalized. They've been pushed right out. But the party has been captured by people who got neoliberal ideologies and so many, some of those on the left who might have been aware of the position of the earlier PPP still believe that they're the same, because even in the Caribbean we still have some who still believe that, and they're waking up to a very rude, they're getting up to a rude awakening, because it's no longer, you cannot be anti-imperialist and invite the imperialists to put military base in your country. We don't have that. But you're right, there is a people are moving, the people are waking up. Even in Guyana, we have we make no apology, we are socialists in our orientation, and we are anti-imperialists. We are seeing that capitalism and war is bringing this planet to. We are facing an existential threat with that, and plus the climate catastrophe. So people are moving, even in Guyana, people are opting, people are moving towards towards a revolutionary socialist position. And that's what we are doing. That's what we do. We go out, we educate people, we work in the villages, communities, that telling them that there's an alternative to this. And you're right, the move towards the left, with of course the setback in Argentina, but there is revolt already. I don't think the one in Argentina is going to last. The Trump of Argentina is going to last. I don't think so. But apart from that, the U.S. is trying to challenge. They're challenging. They came out and said that some U.S. military official that challenging the Chinese influence in the region, because China has done something that others have not done. Many countries, other than in the early days, countries like Libya and Iraq, they give the huge loans to the development of the airport then under Morris Bishop in Grenada, and loans that were interest-free and so. But China is giving a lot of loans. China is building roads and development projects and so. And even the Prime Minister of Barbados said what the arrangement that China makes with Barbados, you cannot ever get it from the IMF or the World Bank. And they're challenging. America wants to challenge because the whole thing about this is their backyard, the Monroe Doctrine, this is their backyard. So how dare us, and that's why Cuba's paying a price. It's more than just being communist. Cuba refused to submit and allow them to trample on their sovereignty and independence. But the others, as I said, our independence is what Walter Rodney called a briefcase independence. It's a fallacious independence. And we in the OVP speak about fighting for true independence. We have what we call a flag and anthem independence, but we don't have true independence. And our sovereignty exists only on paper. It's on paper, right? We were a captured state, and the Imperial and the United States military command is here. And it looks like they're going to set up a military base. They want to set up a military base, but we are going to resist that. And we have to do that at the Caribbean level, because the Caribbean Network in Defense of Humanity and other organizations and so on. We've made it clear that the Caribbean is a zone of peace, and there should be no nuclear warships coming in here and joint military exercises and all of that is going on. But if we're going to have military exercises, let it be between the CARICOM countries. But when the French are here, the British are here, you have all of them, the Americans and all of them participating in this. This is to do after we saw what happened in Grenada. Is if you get any left-wing government coming to power in the Caribbean and the US and the Western powers are opposed to you, they will do like what they did in Grenada. And they prepare those regional militaries for that. When they were going into Grenada, they enlisted the military support of Jamaica and Barbados. And so when they went into Grenada, Guyana stayed out. Guyana opposed it. So that is what. And, President Maduro just started his, he went on the war part. And really it's because he's aware that they want to put a military base right next to Venezuela. And of course, Venezuela, if Guyana is going to allow the United States to put a military base right on the border with Venezuela, then Venezuela and President has a right to say something about it and to defend Venezuela. Our country should not become a satellite. It should not be a springboard for wars of aggression against any country in any part of the world.
Thank you for saying that. And I guess, one of the things I want to talk about was after meetings led by leaders from several CARICOM and CELAC countries, and really led by Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on December 14th, that occurred on December 14th, 2023. Venezuela and Guyana issued a joint statement whereby they agreed not to threaten or use force against each other in the context of the dispute for Essequibo, and agreed to mediate the conflict. What were your thoughts about this mediation that started around December 14th and the role that CARICOM, CELAC, and Prime Minister Gonsalves played in particular?
Well, of course, we support that, and they arrived at what is called the Argyle Agreement. I think the role played by CELAC and CARICOM was very important, and they arrived at that's what we're saying. They have to sit down and talk, and they arrived at this agreement. But shortly after, President Ali returned from Grenada, a U.S. a British warship arrived in Guyana, and that doesn't look good. Because even if it came for something, perception becomes reality. I mean, that was a big blunder. Why would you allow that? And Cameron made the statement after the British warship arrived that Britain is back in Guyana. So that wasn't nice. That certainly you came away from this meeting and then you allow a British military warship to turn up here. So I don't know what is President Ali's position, but there's a second round of talks coming up, and people have pointed that out, right? That was wrong. It was a big blunder, and it shows that maybe there are powerful forces that are pushing them, and who I know for a fact, and I can tell you, Ryan, and I won't tell you where it's coming from because, some other time we can talk about that, but I know for a fact that pressure was being exerted on Prime Minister Gonsalves and the Prime Minister of Dominica not to facilitate this meeting, right? Which shows clearly that those forces want to escalate this thing. They wish to escalate it to the point of an open conflict. Having said that, a couple of years ago, we had a meeting in Barbados, a Pan-African meeting. No, it was a meeting in Caribbean Network in Defense of Humanity. And Ralph Gonzalez spoke at the University of the West Indies campus in Barbados. And he said something. He said he went to Iran on a visit to Iran to tie up trade links and economic cooperation and so on. When he got back, 2 US diplomats paid a visit to his office. He was speaking publicly. It wasn't, he announces to the audience. 2 US diplomats came to his office and asked, what were you doing in Iran? What was the purpose of going to Iran? And he said to them, excuse me. He said, Iran is an ancient civilization. We are meant to be a sovereign nation state, and we can engage who we would like to. But I'm showing you, and Ralph Gonzalez is a very principled person in his politics, and he's always been over the years, I know, he's Marxist in orientation. And he said that. So if a little country like St. Vincent, the Grenadines, small island, you can threaten them, and they don't really have resources like Guyana, right? Guyana is full, you name it, and we have it in Guyana: gold, diamond, bauxite, oil, gas, manganese, timber, you name it. Then you could imagine what is happening here. So somebody, powerful forces didn't want to see this meeting. So we have to look for the second round. The other thing is President Ali made a statement. He said, Guyana, because this matter went before the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. And he said that whatever the outcome of the ruling of the ICJ in this issue, Guyana will recognize the ruling of the ICJ, which is weird. It shows that either two things: either somebody, he knows what we don't know, somebody has given him a guarantee, or he's lying. That is what he said. And this territorial controversy, the mechanisms exist in the Geneva Agreement for us, two countries coming together to work out the settlement. And it's not where the ICJ settling this, but we can't even tell how did we arrive at the ICJ, this ICJ arrangement. Because early Ban Ki-moon, when he was Secretary General, said, look, you have the framework within the 1966 Geneva Agreement. So then the President General, Secretary General of the UN, referred it to the ICJ. So somebody, powerful forces are pushing this thing. Powerful forces. And having said that, the ICJ, we are waiting to see ICJ ruling on Israel, on the Zionist state of Israel, because Netanyahu said that the ICJ cannot stop him from what he's doing. They will not listen to the ICJ. So why, if the ICJ makes a ruling against Venezuela, why should President Maduro and the Venezuelan government recognize or abide by that ruling when Israel ignores it?
Yeah, I mean, very interested to see what that ruling is tomorrow from the ICJ.
That's right.
And I think you said that there definitely are powerful factors behind this. My understanding is on December 14th, around December 14th, the Organization of American States, OAS, which is essentially controlled by the U.S., tried to essentially prevent that the joint statement they came out from coming out, and they tried to essentially escalate or deep six the negotiations before the mediation, before they even happened. I don't know if you were aware of that. The role that the OAS has been trying to play behind the scenes to basically undo or prevent CARICOM, SELEC, and Gonzalez and the other leaders, Lula, etc., from mediating.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to add about that you feel like is important for the audience to be aware of?
Well, I think a number of countries I think Nicaragua and some other countries did call, and to this call to certain countries should pull out of the OAS. The OAS is a tool of the United States. Look at the OAS position towards Venezuela, the OAS position toward Nicaragua, the OAS position towards Cuba. And when the time came to vote and all of that, pressure was put on certain countries to go along. I mean, Guyana, take for example, Guyana, when Guyana voted in the OAS, Guyana went along with those countries, those right-wing regimes that are clients of U.S. imperialism. They went along with that, and our foreign policy is not. We don't have a foreign policy, independent foreign policy. Our foreign policy, when Guyana is going to vote in certain forums like the OAS and the UN, and so we are bullied. We are told how to vote. This actually happens. There are many stories of an ambassador told me that when they were in South Africa on this issue of global reparations, he was actually physically assaulted by US diplomats. And that person is an ambassador today. This is what happens. They actually go in and they tell you how to vote. They actually tell the diplomats, whether they're the foreign ministers of our country, how to vote. And they go along with it. They go along. That's why I said our sovereignty is on paper and our independence is a farce. But as you pointed out earlier, we're seeing the role of the government in Colombia. Lula is back in Brazil, sorry. And I don't think that the Brazilian military are quite nationalistic,
Right.
Yeah, right wing, very right wing. But I don't think they themselves want a military base in Guyana.
In Guyana.
Because there's some fascists or people who do some right-wing populist. I don't want to say right-wing populist because that's more like the guy in Trump and those people in the one in
Javier Milei.
Yes, in Argentina, and the one that we had in Brazil.
Or Bolsonaro.
That's right, Bolsonaro. Look at Peron. You had Peron, and you had, I think it's Vargas. You had not Vargas. You had one in Peru, who was a sort of progressive nationalist.
Castillo.
So some of these military, the left have to be very careful because the left just classify all of them as, they're variants of fascism, and there's some fascists like Peron, who the US were opposed to, and there's sections of the Argentine military and so who don't want to go along. They don't want to see the Argentina being a client of the United States and all of that. And the same thing in Brazil. So you have that. There's that tendency. I don't believe in the classical Comintern definition of what constitutes fascism. I think fascism is very fluid. I don't think fascism is just a reaction to revolution. I think it's an independent, has its own moment, force, and so. And of course, it is counter-revolutionary. But it's a crisis. We've seen that when capitalism is faced with severe crisis, you get these forces that arise. And the only way we can prevent them is through increasing the revolutionary consciousness of the people and fighting. We have to have a fighting left, and not build illusions in this social democratic left that you have. The types of I'm not knocking him, but the types of Cornel West, the DSA, or some of those women in the Democratic Party that claim they're socialists. You know, we have to have a fighting anti-imperialist left. And this struggle is global. It's a global struggle, but each of us will hold down our own corner.
Thank you. Thank you very much for saying that. And those are sort of all the questions we have for you for today. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we close?
Well, I would just like to say again, congratulations on the work you're doing. This is a very important outlet that can reach people. And in fact, we are going to put some of our networks in this area in contact with you, and they should be able to tune into you. We will pass this on so that they can key into you, follow what you are doing, and so. But the struggle, all we can say is the struggle continues. We have to fight, and we're fighting for a better world. We're all allies. And at the end of the day, Ryan, I want to say this. I believe that the basic struggle in this world, the fundamental contradiction, is between those who stand for truth and those who represent falsehood. I believe I preach liberation theology. I did theology. And I believe that all the prophets, we refer to them as prophet revolutionaries, that all the prophets fought for just society. I believe what Ali Shariati said, that the basic battle in the world is between true religion and false religion. And what did he mean by true religion and false religion? It doesn't mean that false religion is this religion, Christianity, or false religion is Islam. True religion is all those who stand for truth and justice and fight for human dignity and against oppression. So whether you call yourself Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or what, if you fight for truth, justice against oppression, you stand in solidarity with every section of humanity, irrespective of religion, color, you are in the religion of truth. Then we have the religion of falsehood. Those who defend the existing status quo, those who fight, those who prevent the emergence of a new world. Whether they call themselves Muslims, Christians, or what, or Jews, they're in that camp. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it. So even if you're an atheist, even if you don't believe that there is God or that there's a transcendental dimension to our lives, but you fight against injustice and you fight for a better world, you are in the religion of truth. Because many who claim that they're believers are in the religion of falsehood. The Houthis are fighting against the Zionists, and yet Jordan and Saudi Arabia and all of them who are meant to be Muslims are on the side of the Zionists. We're seeing it by action. So at the end of the day, this is not the fundamental contradiction, is not between I believe this. This is my philosophy. This is what I subscribe to. It's not between white and black or Islam versus Christianity or Jews. This is between those who stand for truth and justice against those who represent falsehood. And falsehood comes in every shade, color, class, and religion. And the truth comes in every class, shape, and color.
Thank you very much for saying that. That's a very important perspective, and it's and really thank you for coming on the show. You know, it's very hard to get accurate and reliable information and analysis about what's going on, and particularly outside of the U.S., not to mention in the U.S. So we really appreciate that invaluable wisdom and information. And as you know, Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement would say, forward ever,
Backward never.
Backward never. So thank you again for coming on the show, and we do hope to have you back again soon.
Yes, welcome. Anytime, Ryan.